Imagine like an Apple designed trash can, but it's for composting. So all of your food
How often do you guys use this?
Every day.
Daily. Every day. Our kids love it.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite products in our house now.
Happy Wednesday, guys. What's cooking?
What's cooking is that hair. If anyone is not watching the podcast video, Jess has a voluminous set of locks, and I am loving it.
Really
you know what this
hair.
is? This is I drove 4.5 hours today and it's midday for a 20-minute site visit for our big women's event.
Ooh.
And I didn't have time to brush my hair. But I was looking forward to this podcast.
Whatever you did, just do that every day. I'm liking it a lot, Jess. Yeah. And I think everyone out there listening should convert to the video podcast so you can look.
And Sam's promoting Joe and the Juice. Why?
This episode is brought to you by Joe and the Juice Identity.
Oh, yeah. I do like Joe and the Juice.
Joe and the Juice.
I am glad. Now, Sam is sitting. So he's in our podcasting studio / Mario Kart children's area. And I'm glad you're back from the offsite, Sam, because unfortunately, I cannot help our 4-year-old get better than 8th in Mario Kart. And the first day...
Wait, can we just stop and pause on Mario versus Mario?
Oh, Mario.
Do you say Mario? Tomato, I get it. But like, I want to make sure that we're talking about the same kart.
It's a me, Mario.
Well, I clearly am not the expert in this. And so day 1, major meltdown. Day 2, I thought I was going to land in 6th place and redeem myself, but there was a little bit of a slip. But apparently our elder son called you at the offsite and you told him, don't worry, the solution to being 8th is tomorrow we will win when I'm back, which I don't actually think is the life lesson I was trying to teach in the situation, but I'm glad you're back.
Well, I mean, I did get the debrief on the 8th Mario finish for Maverick, and Maverick does have a trouble because Maverick is used to winning. He hits A, he hits the gas, and I do everything else. And I heard it was a meltdown situation. And I did say, like, good news, I'm not going to New York, so I will be back, and we'll get our normal first place finishes.
Lawrence, do you have these kind of challenges when one parent's working and the other has to?
How did you get 8th? Our 6-year-old can get like 3rd.
But I'm holding the controller with him. It is not the most natural situation. Also, my brain, I was playing Suzuki violin throughout my childhood. I was not doing this.
Parenting brought to you by More or Less.
What we need to do is go to Tokyo, and they have real life Mario Kart, and we can all get in real carts, and our kids can be in carts, and we can dress up and do like real races. Because like the video games are cool.
Are there spiny shells?
There's everything.
Yeah, they've got this whole
like
thing in Tokyo where you can do it in the actual streets of Tokyo.
Okay. I'm not sure how I feel about this. But anyway, hi, Morans. You can tell I haven't seen my husband in a few days. We have a lot to get through.
Yeah, we could just make this like a marital episode if you guys need to get some stuff out of your system. I think
I think we actually covered the territory that needed to be covered. But
that's it.
Well, it's nice to see you guys. Welcome to everyone this week, More or Less, where we bring you what's really happening, what people are really talking about. The news is hopping, guys. I don't know if you feel it, but Apple events, IPOs, startup meltdowns, dun dun dun. Let's start this week by going to you, Dave. You were like 3rd row at the Apple event? Like, A, how do you get that ticket? And B, how was it?
Get the ticket by having a very long-term relationship that I'm very grateful for.
It was 2nd row, Jess. Get it right,
Second
please.
row. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Who were you next to? Can you?
So you were the first loser.
No.
That's like the worst row to be in.
No.
It's like first. So you either want to be a gold medalist or at least get a medal.
I don't work there, Sam.
Yeah. I reject that.
Yeah, but I would assume that no one in the first 3 rows.
No, the first row is everybody that works there. Yeah.
Dave, Sam, be quiet for a sec. Dave, take us inside, actually. So viewers, I covered Apple for the Wall Street Journal for a long time. And these events are Apple's mini Super Bowl, right? Yeah. Every time a new device Now, I personally think that like we're on iPhone gazillion and these events have lost some luster, but we can talk about that separately. But they draw in the who's who of Silicon Valley, the Dave Morans, and like I'm actually curious, like walk us through it, how it felt like, and does it feel like, you know, the Apple events of 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Like what's happening down there?
Yeah, I mean, the big difference actually is that the event is no longer live. And this happened after the pandemic. You know, Tim comes out on stage and introduces the event, but then they play a video that is, you know, we've been seeing this for several launch events now, where they have these amazingly produced launch. They're almost mini movies, really, and so that's the big change that's happened since the pandemic. Is that
Why?
the keynote is no longer live? I think that
I can tell you why. I can tell you why.
I think there's actually a practical reason. I mean, you might have a joking reason, but the practical reason is they want to be able to
get it to more people in more places at the same time.
Yeah, they want to be able to translate it to every country in the world. You know, there's a lot behind it. I also noticed, Jess, to the press point, it seems like they've really upped the game in terms of providing pretty amazing different opportunities for all the journalists that were there. Like that was one of the things that a lot of the journalists were talking to me about, was that the way that the event was managed and their ability to get access to the new products, like it's just a very good experience all around. So, I mean, to go inside of it a little bit, I mean, the Steve Jobs Theater is a really incredible place. You know, the thing that I actually love most about it is the sound. It's an unbelievable sound experience, which you would expect, you know, but the quality of the event and the sound experience and the quality of I guess it's a pretty advanced Dolby Cinema projector of some kind. Like it's a really quite shockingly awesome theater experience. And after the show is over, you know, they have a demo area and you can see all the new products, and it's sort of right at the top of the stairs, and you know, get your hands on and see what's new. And so I don't know.
So
do you
what
want to
was
talk
the
about
most
what we saw?
exciting? I mean, all the headlines from the event are that the iPhone is now going to be on the USB-C charging system per Europe regulation, something we talked about last week. Like
that must have been a great launch video. It's like the story of European regulation. USB-C.
I mean, the best video of the whole thing is that they did, I guess it's kind of a take on Larry David to talk about their, Sam, I guess you might have, it was like a Curb Your Enthusiasm skit that they did to talk about their climate goals. Where they had Mother Nature come in and sort of take them to task around the table.
Well, the last Larry David commercial was that wonderful FTX commercial.
Oh yeah.
So you know,
well, Larry David wasn't in it, but the style of the style of the skit.
Get Larry David? What's happening?
Well, I think Tim kind of played that character. You'll have to watch it. I actually think it's quite good, and it communicates. I think the big news of yesterday was that they, for the first time, kind of communicated this big 2030 net zero carbon goal, which is that they're trying to make their entire product line carbon neutral by 2030. And yesterday they actually released the first carbon neutral products, and I believe it's the watch is the main one, and they made some pretty dramatic changes to. I thought, you know, some things people didn't notice. The cobalt in the batteries for all the new iPhones is 100% recycled. And anybody that's sort of in the behind the scenes conversation about, you know, electric and energy is very worried about cobalt and where it's coming from. It typically doesn't come from very good places.
Isn't this all bullshit? Isn't this? Oh, well, hear me out. It's like, again, one, the way companies are net zero is they buy a lot of offsets or plant a lot of trees. And like, that's part one. And then the cobalt, and so a lot of this stuff is bullshit because, like, you got to plant the trees anyway. Like, you know, the fact that you bought them or somehow is not a big deal. And the cobalt thing, it's like, it's not like we're not going to extract a ton more cobalt. So, like, sure, you can be the one using the recycled stuff versus someone else, pay a little more for it, put a nice sticker on it. But it's not like you are actually having an impact from a climate perspective, right? Like, we still need a bunch of rare
I think
metals.
That's why we're talking about neutral here. But I do think it's a little bit intellectually dishonest to call it bullshit, right? Like what they're doing at the scale they're doing is, I think, should be admired, right? Like they're trying to take an enormous supply chain and move it in a better direction, and it will have an impact. I mean, I think that's like, it's like a little bit unfair to say that it wouldn't.
Yeah, I just think like these things all run through markets, right? And so if someone's like, again, like I'm not saying it's obviously it's better than not doing nothing, but like I think a lot of these carbon neutral things they're either bullshit because it literally is just like the offsetty thing, and the quality of offsets is all across the map, and some people do better ones. I'm sure the best tech companies do actually invest in trying to do the best offsets you can, but it is kind of like going to a bunch of rural farmers and being like, "Do you promise to not cut down this forest?" And they're like, sure, I wasn't going to cut it down anyway, but sure, right? Like that type of stuff. Or it's stuff like a lot of the recycling stuff, which is great. Like we should obviously recycle these metals. And it is super cool. You can take a battery, shred it up into pieces, pull the shit out of it, put it back through. There's obviously energy costs to that and the things like that. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to dig up a bunch of rare earth metals for the other products that need it. It's just kind of like, it's like taking a commodity and trying to decommodify it in a way, right?
Yeah, this is an interesting point, but I also want to get back to what Brit was saying about the Apple event. And
can we go back to the iPhone 15,
greenwashing or not greenwashing, and
I think it's a viable thing to note. Like my biggest thing that I noticed was that this took it's a major component of the launch, that's not normal.
But I actually don't have a very I think what they're doing is good, but a major component of their launch also means they decided to talk about it, in part because there's not much else to talk about.
Oh,
right?
I mean, that's fair, but I think they're now pitching it as a feature. It's not just oh, hey, we're doing this, which they've always said, but they're now actually
but it's kind of like
with it, which is a big change for Apple.
But it is kind of just for Apple, yes, but it is like a lot of the EV stuff where you're like, okay, like congratulations, your EV is not like directly using fossil fuels, but that doesn't mean that it isn't actually using a ton of fossil fuels to make it.
It doesn't mean that it isn't cool, that it isn't better, and it isn't positive,
but
it
it's
isn't
marketing.
Something consumers are going to react to, that it is an EV. But don't. You drive up and down 101, and all you see are billboards for phones arguing about the quality of photos. Like literally the only way to get someone to buy a new phone right now is like the pictures taken on the iPhone or the pictures taken on the other phone improved by the Android.
Well, there's the flip one. There's also the one that opens 1,000 times and then breaks. What's that one?
I've wondered if you can turn it into a paper airplane.
But the point being, it seems to me like Apple builds excellent products. They're also a marketing company.
Yeah, absolutely. Best marketing company of all time.
And they need something to talk about. And I'm going to buy a new one of these when this breaks to pieces or doesn't charge or something, not when it's green versus not green, right? But
I just stockpile these. Yeah. I'm looking forward to them in 3 years, introducing a less powerful phone that's the right size for Sam's hand.
You need to stockpile those now because they announced they're discontinuing it.
Oh no!
I already have. Jessica was going to China and she was like, Sam, I need a clean phone. Can I have one of your phones to take to China? And I did not let her have one of them. I was like, no, you can't. I need these.
I found
phones.
another way.
That's my stockpile.
Brit, your take on Apple.
Thank you. Okay, here's my thing. They released the iPhone 15 years ago, 16 years ago. But we're averaging one new iPhone a year at this point. And my question is how many iPhones are we going to release before the next major device innovation? And you could say it's Vision Pro, but I don't think Vision Pro is the iPhone. And so where are we going from here? Are we at iPhone 35?
I spent $600 on two of these.
I think
puppies,
one of those
a
mine,
week
but
ago.
that's okay. Does it
well,
say my
no, they're not. I bought two new ones. This is the new platform.
Cam is holding up AirPods for anyone not on video.
I have an answer.
Multiple copies.
I have an answer to this.
And you lose them so quickly.
Okay, Dave.
I have an answer to this based on what the real big features of yesterday were. Just to your point, the camera technology took another leap forward. The camera, particularly in the iPhone Pro Max, is pretty extraordinary. It's like the equivalent of having a Canon 5D Mark in your pocket. I mean, they put a 105 millimeter zoom lens on this thing. I was playing with it. It's like a true 5x optical zoom that's unlike anything I've ever seen for its size. normally a lens that is that powerful. I mean, Sam knows this. He carries them on all of our trips. Is like this long, and so the fact that they're able to put that into into the same size case as this thing is pretty awesome. I'm actually going to upgrade to the Max because of it, because I think it's that big of an improvement to the camera tech.
But Dave, does it have the moonshot?
It's the moonshot.
Remember Lunar Shot?
Oh,
the
yeah.
Samsung thing.
This is a pretty good story, actually.
This is a great story, and this is where the world is going. So Samsung releases a phone with a super special mode, which has super amazing zoom for taking pictures of the moon. And you're like, hold it, how the fuck do you do that? And everyone's like, that is not possible. But like, it was amazing. Like, you hold up to the moon, and it's like a perfect thing of the moon. What did they do? They basically just like recognized that you were pointing the camera at the moon and loaded up a super high-res image of the moon.
Yeah.
100%. But they advertise as like 1,000x optical zoom on the moon. And you're like, you want to know where camera technology is going? That's what's going. It's like you point at like an unattractive person, and it's like, oh my god, this is the most attractive person I've ever seen. It's just like AI on board,
filters
right?
built in. I don't know, Brit, like using your innovator's brain, like if you were Apple, like what would you
let me
do?
say
I
one.
think it has to take a new. Okay, go ahead.
Britt, the other thing I was going to say, which is towards your question, is there are two things beyond the camera that were really interesting. One, on the Apple Watch, they now have a haptic feedback algorithm that is making it so that you can, take action on your watch by just tapping your fingers, which is a move in the direction of new interface models, right? And then secondly,
so you're wearing your watch and you like want to click a message and you just wave your fingers without touching your watch?
You double tap them like this, and you can set that action to do any number of things. And
that's cool.
It uses a machine learning algorithm to look at not just the accelerometer and the gyroscope, but also the blood flow in your
Vision
hands.
Pro has these features too.
Yes.
Right. So this is something Apple's doubling down on.
And then the camera also now does spatial video. So you can start taking videos that will then translate into the spatial computing environment with this device. So both of these are moving in that direction.
That is actually pretty cool.
Okay, Sam likes one thing about the new phone. We got one.
I'm just excited with the haptics for like Italians to get it, and like they're gonna be clicking all sorts of shit as they talk.
Why are you making fun of your Italian wife? I just have no idea what you're talking about.
Because that's exactly because you do this. You're gonna have a terrible time with this watch. It's gonna be like clicking on all sorts of shit as you're trying to talk.
Very expressive. I'm very expressive. But this is so okay. So we think, well, let's take a poll. Are we like more bullish on Apple after this launch, or are we less bullish on Apple after this launch? To you, Brit.
I'm not like super impressed other than the camera. But I like where we're headed with a new interface. I'm tired of this phone interface, and I think like I guess my question is just how many years. I think it's like closer to 10-year out transition, not 5 years out. But that's just my intuition. I don't know. So yes, but I want them to accelerate faster into getting me off this.
So right direction, but need to go faster. Sam, what about you?
Well, my biggest technology breakthrough the last week has been rediscovering the printer. So,
can you tell them what we've been up to?
Sam, did you get my message?
Episode?
I sent you one.
I've gotten many. I haven't looked at my inbox in the last day because I was on an offsite, but I'll check my inbox when I go upstairs.
I'll explain what's happening.
So I just decided.
Hold on. We need to tell the listeners who didn't get the last episode. So Sam really likes printers these days. We're going backwards in time.
HP.
Like fax machines, printers.
Great, amazing interface.
Send an email to like Sam's printer's email address, and it prints out for him. And that's the way he'll actually respond to your messages. And so a bunch of our friends who heard the episode and other people in the community are now sending Sam.
They're fax bombing him.
Faxes? Are they fax?
No, they're the nicest messages. I get the nicest messages from people. Have a nice day. Hope to see you in New York. It's wonderful. It's my most pure. There's no spam.
How do we feel about the environment to tie it back?
This is not very carbon neutral.
It's fine. My printer is 100% carbon neutral because I bought a fucking tree and I claim it as carbon neutral.
Oh man,
it's great. We'll share.
But I want to
message Sam for the address.
But Sam, is Apple more or less on the right trajectory after yesterday's launch?
Thank you.
I'm bringing it back.
Well, the market says less on the right direction. The market's
well, you're
punching
long.
Apple
Well, that's a short-term view, Sam. You're a seed investor.
Look, I just think like at this point, Apple and the really big tech platforms are such incredible machines that like it's really like none of these launches matter, right? Like they just churn shit out and it's fine and everyone buys it. And like, they add some subscription revenue and charge you $60 a month for more iCloud shit and you pay it. They're like very utility oriented in my mind. So like I do think there's some cool tech stuff going on. Like, again, I don't think there's nothing cool going on in tech. And I do think the spatial computing stuff, even I'll admit, is a cool demo, right? And there is some stuff I think is interesting, but like, no, I'm completely uninterested in another iPhone. I already have a whole stockpile of them and I haven't upgraded in a long time. And like, I think, I think the carbon neutral stuff, kidding aside, like the environment's fucked and I'm super worried about it. I think a lot of the corporate messaging around it is just that, which is they did their market research and people want to not feel terrible about themselves. And so they figured out that they should market it. I think the reality of it is a completely separate, conversation that, is bigger than even Apple. Apple's big, but this shit's even much bigger than they are, right? In terms of how you would orient the world in a way that is kind of, securing our carbon future, which we can all agree is pretty fucked right now, right? I'm pretty cynical about that stuff.
Dave, after the event, did it tip you in the more direction or the less direction?
Well, I'm definitely more. And this event is not, this is the straight up the fairway, the two products that we all use every day. They're like the core kit that anybody carries around, right? Like, you use an iPhone, you use a watch. Like these are kind of standard issue now, right? And so to me, like going into it, expectations wise, I guess to Sam's point, I was expecting the next evolution. I wasn't expecting a revolution yesterday. And so with that being said, the things that we talked about, I think the thing that I'm most excited about in terms of Apple's strategy, and I haven't heard anyone talk about it this way, but I think of where we are at in the computing epochs is that we're in a Cambrian moment in computing, where computing has sort of exploded. It's all around us. It's on our wrists. It's in our ears. Like those AirPods Sam held up are more powerful than the Apollo mission, like in a single AirPod, right? And we're all kind of have like all these different computers all around us all the time, but it's like we've assembled the chairs in an orchestra, but nobody's written a symphony yet. And I think that where this spatial computing vision kind of points toward is this like symphonic view of like this Cambrian moment where we're going to actually start to get all these computers to work together in interesting ways. And so to see these kind of, okay, the Apple Watch is starting to have like, non or whatever you want to call it, haptic interface. The phone itself is going to become an input device for this spatial world. Like we're sort of moving in that direction. And Apple's really the only company that I see kind of taking this Cambrian computing and trying to put it all together into one big vision. And I think that's pretty powerful.
Apple's not a software company. I mean, they are. That's unfair to say. They are definitely, I mean, they're an OS company, right? But like Apple is an Apple because of its ability to do software. I mean, maybe you could disagree.
I would disagree with that. I think that, look, yesterday there was also impressive advancements in silicone. You've got impressive advancements in hardware, and okay, you guys can, pan the environmental aspects of this, but I do think that like what they're doing in hardware is legitimately pretty interesting and innovative. And you pile on top of that the climate stuff, and it's cool. And then the software on top of it is, to achieve this kind of vision that I'm talking about, you have to have software that works together across all of these different devices. I mean, one of the things that they talked about is Siri is now not just on board and out of the cloud, and that's because of their silicone advancements, but they're also, they're putting Siri with, this is kind of like, it's like a footnote in the launch. Siri with transformers is now on device in the watch, right? And like, this is like a...
Right, Dave, so this is a really good point. And I hear everything you're saying, but I still don't use Siri because it's still not very good.
Yeah, but I think what they said yesterday is we've now put Siri on device because of our silicone. It has transformers in it. That points towards an investment in Siri that means that within a few years, that's going to be radically different.
Maybe. Or maybe the teams would still be bickering and they won't be able to build anything, right? Like,
we'll see.
I agree. There's parts of hardware where obviously they're exceptional, but like at the end of the day, in this Cambrian explosion of computing, like the endpoints matter
They
too,
do.
and the services matter. And, in the mobile world, like they could kind of limp into these key services like maps, like messaging, and make them good enough and leverage their scale. But if we're at another inflection point, there could be another realignment. Like, I just say I'm actually bullish long-term Apple, and like you just can't like count this like almost $3 trillion kind of company out or whatever. But I do think of an event like this, like pulls me back slightly more negative, just because I think it reveals like all these kind of issues under the surface. And guys, I don't want to like talk about China all day long, but like the biggest things that are happening right now to Apple that affect deeply the company, and probably like why the stock isn't impressed, is like, this trade war that I was witnessing on my trip there. Like China came back and they said, oh, now we're going to block iPhones from government agencies. And, at the same time, like we reported the information that their big bet on like US semi manufacturing actually has this wrinkle that final assembly still happens in Taiwan. Like these are the big issues that I think also like in many ways matter more.
So look, I don't know how we haven't brought up the fact, Dave, Cambrian explosion, the whole idea of it is openness. And Apple is Cambrian explosion is all their own devices, right? Like the reason Apple gets away with shitty software is because it's a fully vertical closed ecosystem. You're like, you have to use Apple Maps because like they force you into it effectively. The same thing with Siri, etc. So I think it's just interesting language. Like the reality is, why is the China thing such a big deal? It's because it's a fucking closed platform, right? And so they're so rich, right, and able to make such good hardware that's so much better than everyone else, they can get away with this. But iMessage, they are like the ultimate and always have been vertically closed system where like it's like a Cambrian explosion of their own devices, as opposed to it being what we grew up with, which is the open internet and open innovation and open protocols. So like, the question is, I think the real Apple story still continues to be it's closed systems versus open systems, and Apple is the closed system.
Look, I think that's fair, and Sam, I think your point is fair on one vector, but the other vector, and you and I both know this from investing in a lot of hardware companies, that to create a great hardware company, and 9 out of 10 hardware companies fail because of how
10 out of 10 fail.
How difficult it is to.
But some get acquired right before they fail, and therefore
and
you
the
make
reason
money.
why is that the integration between hardware and software, and this has been said ad nauseum throughout the millennia, is incredibly difficult. And it just
millennia of hardware.
It just is, right? And we could go.
It's like when you invented the wheel. It's like putting that fucking wheel on an axle is like a fucking
who else
disaster.
is like this, right? Like Tesla, right? Like you buy a Tesla car and like the whole thing is vertically integrated, right? Like
I hear, by the way, you guys may be changing your Tesla. Like, what's up with that? You just upgraded.
We have a third kid, Jess.
If you read this, we can put the article in, but there's a really interesting interview with the CEO of Ford a few weeks ago where he runs down all of the different suppliers of different hardware, different firmware, that when he inherited the company, he had to go and say, okay, if we're going to create an electric car, like, can we even remotely do what not Tesla, but like, let's say the next best electric EV company? And he runs down, it's something like I want to say it's on the order of 1,000 different vendors with 1,000 different firmwares that they have to maintain code bases across all of these different things. They have to integrate that and make it safe, right? And all these kinds of things. And so to me, it's like, it's hard to knock Apple for doing the thing that produces the best user experience. You can have like downstream, like,
I'm not knocking. Look, I don't knock them at all, and I agree with you, Dave. I mean, the reality is one of the things that's beauty of Silicon Valley in this stuff is it's actually much easier to start with a blank piece of paper, right, and just like go monoline and do it all yourself. Like there's a whole bunch. Like it
especially
is. And, like,
hardware.
Especially hardware. And hardware is a disaster of a business. I mean, every once in a while we invest in a hardware company because it's so fucking cool. You really just have to. And like the reality is, of the hardware companies, even that we've made money on, it's mostly because someone big bought them because the product was so good. and one generation later it would have died. Right, like I mean, Nest is the ideal story of this.
We should really do an entire podcast
so
on this because the capital structure of hardware, I think, is not talked about enough, and more of it should exist. But there's all these things: dilution, capital, like all these kinds of things that get in the way of new atoms coming into the world.
And there are good, look, I'm like sitting here with a Garmin watch, not an Apple Watch, fiddling with another Garmin device. Garmin's avionics stuff. Like Garmin makes amazing hardware, right? And it's.
But is that because of their B2B business? Like they've got a massive B2B like military business.
I
right?
assume so.
I have a question. Brit and Dave, you guys are speaking of hardware in the sauna making business.
Yes.
Is this a good example?
And electric boats.
Yeah, we got boats and saunas.
Why are you incubating and building saunas if hardware is so hard?
Well, I think that hardware is it's like entrepreneurship on expert mode, right? Like it's a very bad thing to try to do if you're a first-time entrepreneur. If you're a multi-time entrepreneur and you understand some of the things that we've talked about, like how difficult the capital structures are, how difficult the design and engineering, like there's a lot of mechanical engineering, a lot of electrical engineering, and then you also have supply chain issues. And it's not just setting up the supply chain, but it's setting up the sell-through and management of the actual inventory in the supply chain. Like most hardware companies actually die with a bunch of stuff on pallets still in China or Vietnam or wherever they're being assembled.
Isn't Flexport supposed to change that? Speaking of
sort of,
in the news?
But it doesn't matter if you don't set up your sales channels to sell through into retail properly. You end up in a bad position.
Shopify supposed to change that?
No, but look, even you make a great product that everyone loves, like boosted boards. Love them, amazing
Make
product.
Sure our listeners
and
know
Casey Neistat has all the remaining inventory.
Right. Well, I actually am very proud. One of my claims to fame is I introduced Casey to boosted boards. Right. Like that was I was with him and I was like, Casey, you gotta try this thing, and he became the boosted board.
One of my favorite seed hardware investments. Right, Sam? Yeah.
Amazing, but died, dead, right? They all die, right? Unless someone buys them, because it's impossible.
Say,
I think if you have an
bunch of founders, I will say I've noticed a bunch of I would call them Silicon Valley alumni. They've already made it. They're huge names who don't want to work on software anymore. They want to build physical things.
This is Matt Rogers' garbage can. Can we talk about this one?
I love the garbage.
Yeah, we have one and it's amazing.
I knew you'd have one. Okay, walk us through. So Matt Rogers was one of the co-founders of Nest.
Yes, we were seed investors. It's called Mill.
And it's not just Matt Rogers. Give the whole team credit. It's Matt Rogers and Harry Tannenbaum, who is Susan Kerr, the designer of the Apple logo's son, and he's a fantastic founder in his own right. So
I just never met him.
Yeah.
This thing looks like an Apple product. Imagine an Apple designed trash can, but it's for composting. So all of your food.
How often do you guys use this?
Every day.
Daily. Every day. Our kids love it.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite products in our house now. And I've been...
Okay, so what happens? You put it in, then what?
Every night it runs like a dish. You run the dishwasher at night. You run your mill at night, but it's on auto, so you don't have to do it. And then it turns all the food into soil.
That's actually pretty sweet. Why don't
you should get one? I mean...
We're not VIPs.
Look, you guys, we were investors.
I looked at a business called Garby a while ago, which was a smart garbage can that identified the shit you were throwing out and would just reorder the stuff as you threw it out.
That doesn't seem environmentally friendly. But Brit, what happens with the soil?
I'll have to say,
what do you do with it?
I was very skeptical about this. And, we were investors and it's hardware and all the things that we've just said. And then when it got into our house, I was even like, am I really going to use this? And I find it to be the most delightful product to use because you put the food...
What do you do with all the
You
soil?
can put it in your garden, or you can send it back to them and they distribute it to farms that need it.
That's a great business model. So they're getting all this free soil and they're not even paying you for it?
But you're doing better.
I mean,
we put it in our garden and our plants and stuff, but uneaten food is the most common material in landfills, and most of it comes from our homes. And when it rots, it produces methane, a gas that's 80 times more potent than CO2. So it's also just there's
good for everything.
Good. It's really, It's
Can you buy one of these on the open internet, or do you have to tell people?
Mill.com. MILL.
I can't. It's going to be Apple.com soon because of their carbon zero agreement. They're going to say,
But you know what?
don't
I actually
worry.
think this is case in point. Matt Rogers is a multi-time hardware entrepreneur. The guy is world class. And I was thinking about it. It's like, wow, this guy is amazing. He knocks it out of the park. He adds things to, the wall with the Nest, and he's like one of the only people that's landing things in homes that's actually improving key things.
He was part of the iPhone team with Tony, wasn't he?
I believe so, yeah.
Also, our kids love seeing it's like magic. Every morning they open it and they're like, "It is soil again," and it's like teaching them this. Or it does feel magical. There's like a fun moment, learning.
It is
moment,
kind of shocking. It's amazing how
come I've never seen one of these in the wild. And you guys talk about all your favorite things, and I had to bring it up. I'm slightly skeptical.
No, it just
Very
launched
new,
like
Jess.
a month ago.
No, I'm more in on this. I want two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's get affiliate codes for our listeners, Dave.
I will say on the hardware thing, I will tell you, I was joking, but joking meaning not totally joking the other day with my obsession with printers. It's like, man, Bloomberg had the Bloomberg terminal. Should the information make custom printers that only print information articles and then sell them for a bunch of money? How steampunk and cool would that be? You'd be like, you pay $10,000, the terminal of the information prints your articles every day.
Unfortunately, our subscribers are too intelligent to pay us $10,000 for a printer.
Can I tell you a fun Apple story about printers?
I don't know. It's a pretty great experience because then it's just
I'm gonna
paper
bring this back.
and you're like, oh, that's
I'm
a
going
great
to bring
article.
this back. I started out as an intern at Apple way back in the day, and I worked in the marketing and PR group originally, and every day we'd have to print out physically for Steve Jobs every press story that happened about Apple the day prior. And by 9 a.m., it was my job to drop off this packet of the printed articles on Steve's desk. And I would walk into his office and I'd hold my breath because I heard all these horror stories where he just fires you on the spot. And I would drop it off and I would walk out so fast. I was so nervous. But he wanted to I think ironic and funny how that's how he wanted to consume information.
That's a great story, Brit, on multiple levels, because most people are afraid of Anna Wintour as the intern. I love this. You were the intern who had to walk in
every day
with the stack of paper. Also, today, can you imagine? You could not publish all the things written about Apple in the day, right? Or print. So that's fabulous.
Well, you need more interns. You need 5 interns. But look, I would love to have. But the thing about the hardware thing was gonna be I was like, how would you even make that? It's really hard. Would you have an Arduino and somehow plug it into an existing?
Yeah.
Would you if I wanted a custom printer that only printed stuff? It's I don't even know how to begin.
I think that is how you would do it.
It is very different.
Right?
Than
That is how
software.
you would do it. You'd start with Arduino.
Are you launching a new hardware business right now, Sam? You have enough margin on that?
You want to fund it?
We love funding hardware businesses.
You'd start with Arduino. You'd use a 3D printer. You'd get all the other components off Alibaba.
So I want to talk a little bit about spatial computing, okay? Because if we just go back. So Dave, you're saying that a camera that can take images for spatial computing. Sam, this is the one thing that you've gotten excited about this episode. Why is this? What do you actually mean? Explain it to us. And then also, is this because we're all going to live in VR? Because we're not.
No.
So
I guess I'll take it first because I mean 2 things. I think that there's this VR vision that people think that this lands in, right? On the one hand. And on the other hand, it's what I'm trying to posit here, which is that this Cambrian moment in computing happened. We've got computers everywhere. How do we make them all come together to improve our lives in a meaningful way? And I think those are 2 very different things. But Apple's march towards spatial computing is actually the thing driving, pulling all of this stuff together and making it all work in a way that is more integrated. And so I think you kind of have 2 things going on, right? You're now going to have a watch that you can tap your hands and interact with. And you've got a phone that can take photos, it's videos that are spatial videos, and you can watch those on your Vision Pro someday. But it's not necessary, you don't have to, right? It could just be that, you're going on vacation or you've got you're going surfing with your kids and you want to remember that in a far more detailed way. And so the use case may be that you actually never put on the headset unless you want to go back and remember those memories, right? Or I was talking to a couple of the people on the management team at Apple yesterday, and one of the best use cases people are saying is sports. Just that, being able to watch sports in this thing is apparently just shockingly awesome because the depth, it's like this spatial depth thing that these things are doing, because it's a combination of two lenses and LiDAR that creates this. So you've got a depth map in the actual video. And so it sort of turns it into a depth video, I guess is maybe the right way to think about it, that, makes you feel like you're actually back in the moment, or in the case of sports, like you're literally there courtside watching, which I think is going to feel pretty radical the more it comes around.
Sam, what's your excitement about? I mean, maybe it's Dave articulated well.
Well, I think Dave is basically, to me, I think the most magical hardware experience I've had in a long time was the Insta360, right? Ironically, not a device made by Apple.
Love that thing.
The fact that it's impossible, right?
And tell me, it's a very small camera. It
Tiny.
looks like almost like a
smaller than a GoPro.
Yeah, but it is the product that GoPro should have been, but isn't, partially because the GoPro sucks at software and Insta360 is really good at software. But it keeps the horizon, you can spin around, it's super easy to interact with, and it is a demonstrably better experience than just a flat video, and it's because of the way it works is you just on the margin will always use Insta360 over a traditional camera because it's strictly better, and you can reproduce normal video better, but you can also create other experiences and re-explore them. To me, the spatial computing thing in that direction is just the obvious kind of next directional step. And if Insta360 10 years ago, maybe more, in the early days of Oculus, if you want to do a 3D video, I remember you get a globe of cameras, it'd be GoPros in an array, right? And it was just fucking impossible to do exact. And now Insta360 just nailed it, that piece of it. This is just kind of the next level up of that, and I think it'll be useful in all sorts of directions, and it will just be better. There'll be a point, just as we look back and we're man, when we were kids, yes, we had photos, but we have so few, and they're pretty shitty. Right? And now we have photos of everything, and they're much richer. Our children will look back and I cannot believe how shitty the quality was, right? And the content from our childhood, and it's going to be because of tech like this. There's just no question.
Olivia Rodrigo, who is a big name in the Morin household, is very, very famous.
Thanks for consistently taking our age down.
Amazing new album.
Oh my god, she's the next Taylor Swift.
Sam, she's like the best new singer-songwriter. She's 20.
Okay, but
you don't know who she is? You're joking.
You don't know who.
Does she compost?
Maybe.
And she's carbon neutral by 2030. And she recorded her whole new music video that came out yesterday and timed with the Apple event, and her new album just came out with the iPhone 15 and using all the spatial video tools and things. So it's also interesting. Obviously, that was for
I guess you can't watch it yet, though, right? Or can you?
Well, you can watch the video, but you can't. I don't know the details on how.
This sounds really cool, but may I remind us that 3D never really took. I mean, you used to be able to have 3D.
This is different.
It's also it's just so much more data, right, that you can work with it, and I just don't. There's no way that that it's not going to end up heightening what you can do. Everything from editing on if you want to edit something into 2D versus just I actually do believe that the place VR will work is for sure, I'm going to want to replay my memories in VR. There's just no chance. It's of course you're going to want that, right? On top of the fact that just scanning the real world, the hardest. I actually am in the camp, although I'm generally very skeptical on VR. It obviously is a real technology. One of the hardest things is world creation. And the easy way to create a world is going to be to just walk through with an Insta360 or this thing and clone it digitally and then explore it. And the reality is we're just moving in that direction reasonably quickly. Where the world building tools are going to be super hard. But if you told me the way VR actually happens is you get the capture devices good enough and cheap enough and ubiquitous enough, people start capturing all this real world stuff, and then to against all of my things, you throw AI on top of it, and you're hey, AI machine, I just walked through the Taj Mahal, make it way sicker and psychedelic. That is because it's too hard for humans to make 3D worlds without these tools.
This is exactly what we saw yesterday.
I was on the Google Maps Street View team in 2007 when Street View just launched. And we would put these crazy cameras on cars and drive through Brazil and India. And now, if people have this on their phone, I bet there's some kind of crowdsourcing
No,
thing.
where it's called Nexar, and
Yeah.
we're
Oh, good.
investors in
Okay,
it,
great.
and it works really fucking. Nexar has like literally snapshots of the entire most of the world's streets every like
But I
From, like,
15
real
minutes
people.
because they have so many cameras and they just deploy cameras everywhere and stitch it all together in the cloud and like can replay like every major street in America.
But
like,
to Sam's point, what we saw
right?
yesterday was, it was sort of a little footnote at the end of the keynote, but every single new iPhone is carrying that capability, like starting in a couple months, right? So this data is gonna,
Yeah.
and I think that's the other thing that we're not talking about here, Jess, which is that, the story of what's going on with AI and databases and all of this stuff is this sort of, it's also Cambrian, right? It's taking many different data types, bringing them all together and creating these like symphonies of new, like Sam said, generative experiences, etc. And like that's what's happening here, is that like this spatial video is like a combination of many, many, many different sensors and the power of that silicone all coming together to make this possible now in a way that wasn't before.
I just would keep saying, Dave, it's not a Cambrian explosion because it's designed by a single centralized node. Like a Cambrian explosion, a
Dave's
communication
talking
explosion of
about
data.
the industry-wide trend.
Yeah, Sam,
I get it. I'm just saying a Cambrian explosion is a evolutionary concept. It's not God.
No.
And like Apple is a
yeah.
God-oriented.
Yeah, Sam, sorry.
vertical.
I put Apple as a good example of somebody who is trying to bring together tons of different chips and all this stuff. Look at all of our desks. There's just compute everywhere, right? Like this is something that needs to happen across the whole ecosystem. They're just one example, right? Like I should be clear.
And I think it's really interesting. I guess I do this for a living, to like handicap companies' strengths and weaknesses and go into these new eras, because I'll totally say, like, if it comes to like OS level, all of that, Apple's exceptional. But like, we've had a lot of reporting around how they're approaching AI, for instance, and they are tripping up over like data's being in different silos, right? Like their real privacy crusade, which again is, well motivated, but has led to all sorts of unintended consequences around what they can do with their data, right? There's a reason that, they are deep in this partnership with Google Search, which for those of you guys, like, is now gone to trial at the DOJ, something we'll probably talk about in the future. We're in the beginning of a 10-week trial over the question of that search deal and others. And so I think it's unclear, like, will Apple like develop some great software and use AI in their products and that? Yes, but like, we're in the cusp of something, and these integration issues with different types of data, like that they haven't, they've relied on their closed ecosystem of apps to deliver those kinds of things to consumers. And maybe that's fine. Like, you don't have to control every single piece of it, but
I actually think this is the real antitrust argument, which is that because Apple is so centralized, right, in terms of how they approach this stuff, and because they are going to have weaknesses, I think the bigger, honest possible case is that Apple will, because of their data structures and how they've approached privacy and a bunch of other stuff, at a pretty deep level, hold back the world's innovation on this stuff, right? Literally because not on purpose, not like in some like super, because they have a very opinionated stance, and it's not a Cambrian explosion. It's this like top-down integrated stack approach. And like the argument that actually antitrust is wrong in thinking about any specific layer, I mean, like, oh, well, you control that, so you're squelching innovation in that specific, that's not the way to think about it. It's like, if you are like literally half of the world's phones and all of the rich people world phones are yours, your opinions about how an ecosystem should or shouldn't work will literally at a like global level hold back or push forward innovation in certain areas, right? And I think that's the real place we're at, is these companies are so big. It's not even on purpose, but Apple specifically, like, their philosophy of this stuff is going to dramatically influence timelines on what does and doesn't happen.
yeah, it's true. But then the alternative is like, people can't pick the products they want. I mean, I don't know. Like, this is the
Well, no, the alternative is like the internet. Remember that thing? That was sweet, right? Like, where it was like open protocols.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
and services could trade data, and there wasn't like a master deciding what apps you could and couldn't launch.
I mean, one of
right?
my if I could wave a magic wand and have a hardware API, like, I think that would be amazing, right? Like, I think there's probably factories that Apple just stops using that are, could produce enormously interesting hardware for like lots of entrepreneurs. And the fact that it's, it's so hard to produce these hardware things like we've been talking about, like that's like my sort of pie in the sky dream that like I wish that like the hardware ecosystem, like Apple had like an open hardware ecosystem that they enabled, not just an app ecosystem, right? Because then you'd have a real Cambrian explosion of things.
Yeah, that would be super cool. I mean, the problem is, as we all know, like that like economically just makes no sense for them, right? It's like for anyone, right? That's the problem is like when you actually have human beings making
right?
shit.
I mean, that was a big deal when you can get Apple TV and formerly known as iTunes, or maybe still known as iTunes, or I've lost track, right? We get it on a Samsung TV, right? Like that was a big deal because that wasn't the Apple way. So, guys, I think we covered a lot of ground. This is kind of our Apple episode. Like, is there more to say about?
There's always more to say about Apple, but we can come back to this one several times. Dave and I love the fruit company. Let's be honest.
So is it going to be? It's like is the title going to be of the episode like biting the fruit of apple and then composting it? Like there's got to be some like apple fruit compost.
Listeners may know I take notes throughout these episodes.
Composting apple.
The all important title of the episode. And to bring you guys behind the scenes, I was getting some feedback from my husband that our episode titles weren't punchy enough. So if you notice a punchier direction, you can credit Sam for that. I like to make sure that they're grammatically correct, but I have some ideas. So we don't want to, people clicked on the title. They know what title we picked.
Yeah, if they made it this far, they can.
If you made it this far,
see how the
Brit,
apple is composted.
Do you have any final thoughts for us?
Go buy an iPhone 15 and...
Wait, why are we promoting Apple? I don't know. Go buy an
they
iPhone
don't pay
15.
us.
The titanium is pretty cool.
I will say, Dave, here's a question for you. Does everyone still get up and like cheer at the beginning of an Apple event? Because it always made me as a journalist somewhat uncomfortable to be part of like seeing like just journalists like standing up and cheering. Not that people can't acknowledge the company, but it's very unusual. People don't cheer at press conferences.
It was interesting. There was actually a lot of cheering during the environmental section this time, which I noticed. It was noticeable, but I don't think the phenomenon you're describing happens. I mean, I think when Tim walks out, people are, welcoming and whatnot, but it's I would describe it as normal crowd behavior.
I would be excited if there's a cheer of compost.
Oh my God, we're going to get off this call and Sam's going to order 3 of these things. They're going to arrive. We're not going to know what to do.
No, they're easy.
And he's never going to compost and I'm going to be stuck.
You guys are going to love it.
Out, so.
Your kids are going to love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll probably report back on a future episode.
Right.
To everyone out there, thanks for listening to another episode of More or Less. We are so grateful for the listeners, the feedback, the reviews, the comments, the story ideas, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys later.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.